Well, hi everyone. We are smack dab in the middle of a multi-part series on sexual brokenness in the church. So thanks for joining us. We're glad you're here. I am Steve, this is Colleen, and we are going to tackle a subject today which I think if we really are serious about it, it was probably the thing that triggered us most to wanting to even get into this topic, and that was pornography. So there's a few things we want to talk about in multiple layers, and so Kyle, tell us a little bit about what you think we'd like to do today, where we would like to go with this.
Yeah. Well, I think, kind of what sparked this was we've got, have been experiencing people connecting with our ministry in a myriad of ways, a lot around this issue of pornography, and we're just watching it blow up marriages. So our passion is particular to marriages, but my goodness, there are a lot of people struggling with porn. I think at the place where we realize there's like this tipping point in the church of so many people engaging in porn, the shame that's kind of come around it that is driving people underground, and we're like, we got to talk about the porn thing. And then we decided we're going to talk about a lot of sexual brokenness because porn is not the only thing, but it really is kind of a big thing that we need to tackle.
Well, and if we're honest about this, I'm going to use a round number and say if there are 10 people that we're in close relationship right now with, and that might be the inner circle of folks that we consider very safe, and then those that might be even on the next layer, I would say probably 6 out of those 10 in some way have disclosed that they're struggling with pornography or have in the recent past. And it's really damaging, and they recognize it, damaging to their relationship with their spouse, and there's a couple of people that are single, actually. But I look at it, and I'm a little bit observing it from the outside in because it's not something I personally struggle with, but I relate, I can understand how it would be so damaging as you look at it, and not only just as individuals, but as a society, and some of the areas as we start to dig into this a little deeper that we'll talk about relationships. So it is disturbing, and to the extent that we want to have an honest conversation about it, and invite you into it. So if you are hearing something that's important in your journey that you would like to kick back our way and just contribute, and one in particular is this area in relationship and how damaging it can be, because we've heard on multiple fronts, and how hard it is to try to get underneath this and really cope with it in relationship.
Yeah. Well, and I think, we're going to tackle this, and we're in a series on sexual brokenness, but I think this pornography piece is going to be broken down probably into 4 pieces. So not the only tape that we're going to do. If this is something you're struggling with and you're kind of saying, I want to stick with you, there's going to be a 4-piece part of this. And I would say as we looked at the issue and said, what are the important things? We were really interested in the relational implications and relational breakdown. And so certainly we're going to be talking about that. That'll be a focus for today. The individual ramifications of what does it do around our transformational journey with God, really important. That deserves its own space. And then society, what is this driving in terms of society? We're going to tackle that, about how all kinds of brokenness is coming out of this addiction to pornography in our culture. And then I think we really need to talk about the victims of pornography. I am amazed at how things get normalized in culture. And we have people who are involved in pornography. Some we could say are victims. When we see children, we're like, oh, they weren't wanting to do this, they're victims. But the reality is when you see people who are making X-rated films, when you see, people prostituting, they're victims. And so I think we want to give special attention to the victim status.
Yeah, because we sometimes blame them as part of the problem.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
And if there wasn't
absolutely.
as much demand for that, that problem wouldn't exist. It's on the demand side that we really need to focus too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And understanding, I think when we talk about individual brokenness, the one thing here loud and clear, if you are a person who struggles with pornographic use, when we talk about some of the individual statistics, I love a book called Unwanted by Jay Stringer. Amazing book, highly recommended. But he did a bunch of research around what are even the factors that lead people to pornography use? And when we see the linkages to childhood sexual abuse, there's usually a story that is even driving pornography use. And so we're going to be talking about that. But for today, I think we really wanted to kind of highlight the relational aspects, like what is happening in marriages around this issue. And I would say probably one of the most heartbreaking things to me is when I hear men say, I got into this because it won't hurt my wife. It won't hurt my family. It's not really hurting anything because it's just something I go and do. And I'm like, I have never heard such a big lie in the consequences of what happens in relationship as this one.
No, and it's a lie straight from hell, quite frankly. The enemy just loves to convince us that it's a victimless offense. And when you think about the fact that you would objectify someone else's daughter or son, and there's not that connection, it's sort of, there's really nobody. It's just a picture or a video, and it's really not that. I agree. It's just there's something missing in our logic when it comes to that.
Well, I'm going to steal something from someone that we both love. Somebody who's been very influential in our journeys, Terry Wardle. Again, another person in terms of really getting brokenness and devoting his life to helping people embrace their own brokenness. Terry talks about two tables, and there's the world's table and there's the Lord's table. And he says something in one of his teachings that I love, and he talks about how appealing the world's table is set. And then he tells you about the Lord's table and how appealing that's set. But what he says about the world is pretty much like you're eating dung, you're eating horse crap, cow poop, whatever. He said, but if the table was set in a way that you got what it was, nobody's going to eat there. They're going to go over to the lavish table that's set of the Lord. And I think, just kind of using that analogy, I think if we're honest, I want to set the table of what the poop really is and not the whole kind of hocus pocus that Satan has kind of made this poop look edible. And so I sit there and think, wow, Steve, if I would have come to you and said, I'm going to set a table that when you eat from it and when you eat this food, you're going to feel inadequate, you're going to feel insecure, you're going to feel unattractive, and you are constantly going to have repeated messages that I am never going to measure up. And I'm going to say, go eat that food. It's going to do it to you. And as a matter of fact, that amazing love-making we used to do where we felt connected, afterwards we got drawn close together. Soon as you eat from this table, you're going to just basically go, man, I just need to get my needs met. I don't really care about intimacy. We're going to break that incredible bond that we have in a relationship more and more and more. We are going to build distrust between us. So we're no longer going to trust each other, and no longer are we going to kind of roll over and say, man, that was amazing. We're going to be like, oh, I just need more. Where you would never look at me as your beauty, but go, I wish she looked more like this woman. She's not quite perfect and you're not satisfied. But better yet, when you would look at yourself in the mirror and say, I don't even measure up because I just saw a man who looked a whole lot better than me. Would you eat from that table?
Yeah, well, we know the answer to that
question.
Yeah.
And so I think it is amazing that Satan is able to disguise what we think we want and what we think looks really appealing. And the reality is we have seen the research that talks about the devastating implications.
Well, if you look at we talked last time about the tree of brokenness and the core longings that aren't being met in our relationship with God. Well, this is another sort of an anesthesia for not really seeking out our best in our relationship with the Lord. We want to seek out something else. And and look, we fell victim to it, the world's table, differently than what we're talking about today. But wow, it's enticing. It's really enticing.
Well, I mean, and I'm going to out myself in this area, which will probably be shocking to some people. I've already told you, before my first marriage, my husband and I had sex outside of marriage, and that wasn't okay. didn't realize how damaging that was. That's has its own level of damage. But I can remember as things were progressing, it felt like, oh, let's just spice some things up. And it was back in the day with Blockbuster, and you could go in and buy things. And so, like, we watch porn to kind of spice up our relationship, follows us into our marriage. And I will never forget when I met the first sex trafficking survivor clinically, and I had told that story in one of the first videotapes. And all of a sudden I'm going, there's a victim here. And then I had to wrestle with the victim nature of the people that were watching and going, I just bought into a devastating lie. And I don't think it's been years to even unfold how wrong that was, why I was willing to be a part of that. But interesting that so many of us just kind of buy into these lies. We fall into things without clearly thinking through God's intent. I would say many of us in culture today, this whole shades of gray or whatever, that whole thing, 50 Shades of Gray thing. Like when my friends were reading romance novels and talking about this, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like this is softcore pornography and about some really abusive acts,
Worse than
actually.
soft, quite frankly.
Yeah,
at times,
I
I
mean,
think.
it would have been hardcore pornography back in
Yeah.
the day. Now we're actually allowed to call it soft.
I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. But I think the piece for me is that women can be lustful. We are interested in sex as well. We can be visual, not like men, but it's a trap, like for all of us. And I think just the drivers relationally of going, let's enjoy this together. There's a lie in that too.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah. So,
So world's table, Lord's table, two very different models to eat from. I think when we look at the Lord's table and the way Terry describes it, it's lavish, it's overflowing. You know, the chalice is overflowing with love. It's just a different way of seeing things, even though the counterfeit looks similar until you partake from the Lord's table. It's totally different.
yeah.
As we compare the Lord's table to the world's table, we may want to draw a parallel to things that we have seen in the past that particularly equate to a world's table view. So what do you have in mind if we want to do something like that?
You know what? I think about, here's a good example of what it looks like to eat at the world's table and what you're going to get when we start to talk about what does this look like for your sexuality. I mean, if we really believe that the sexual relationship between Adam and Eve, between us, is representation of the relationship with God, and that union is such a powerful, incredible thing and is sacred, then, and that's what sexuality is supposed to be about, let's look at somebody who ate at the world's table a whole lot and what happened to that person. Let's say, is that what we want to have happen to us? And I think Hugh Hefner is a great example. Like, I love that the person who brought all this huge sexual revolution and the images to begin with actually had all the Playboy bunnies running around his mansion. So we had women handcrafted for him, if we're really honest. So plastic surgery, you know, the perfect image of blonde bombshell beauty that, you know, those of us who are women go, is that the image? We compare ourselves to that. So we have these perfectly sculpted women. We have this man who can have sex with all of them anytime he wants, anytime, day or night. And I love that at the end, not even that close to the end of his life, people start actually doing interviews to say, what was it like, you know, to be sexual with this man? And his most intimate partners would say multiple people had to be in the room. He needed to be stimulated all the time. He had to have pornography playing, and he would masturbate because he couldn't actually have natural sexual relationships anymore. And I thought, and the pornography got crazier and crazier and crazier. And I thought, that's what the world table yields for you in sexuality. For the person who could have it all and gave himself over to this, that he basically exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural. He was incapable of actually having natural sexual relations. And I'm like, that's just crazy. Like, is that really where we want to head? But it is actually the destruction of pornography. I mean, think about some of the things that happen. I mean, between a man and a wife. And I will say, I mean, I've heard both sides in counseling, but the woman's side, when men say, oh, it doesn't hurt her at all. And I hear the woman's side, and women will say, when my husband comes to bed and wants to make love, it's as if he's not even there at all. Right. And I'm constantly thinking about the woman he's cheating with. Now, you may not think that pornography is cheating the same way that infidelity is cheating, but the majority of women, when surveyed, actually consider it cheating. And here's the reason why. They'll say, I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking about the other woman. I'm thinking about what she looks like, what her breasts are like, what her butt is like, and I'm thinking about mine with all of its flaws, and I don't measure up. And so the other woman, or multiple other women, are in the bed. Right. And the interesting thing about those women is not even the fact that they probably are enhanced in the natural, they're photoshopped. So no woman can ever compete against the images of what are happening online. Right. That's felt in the bedroom. That definitely translates to my husband cannot have the same kind of desire for me. I don't measure up. So you've got women checking out. But even more importantly, they start to describe this detachment, like my husband's just not there. And the bigger detachment is, I've heard this said before, that women, I mean, we are slow to kind of warm up in the intimacy, and men need to start about 10 o'clock in the morning loving us so that at 10 o'clock at night, we're like, yeah, we're ready to make love. Guys, man, you're all ready to go. 5 minutes, let's go. So you can start, at 2 minutes to 10 and be ready at 10 o'clock, where we're like, man, it takes us 12 hours, and love us by doing the dishes, and love us by serving us and being romantic. And the women whose husbands, are actively involved with porn, one of the things they often say is that foreplay, if you will, doesn't happen. And all of a sudden, because women in porn are ready to go all the time to do anything, any urge you have, men start to expect that. It actually changes their brain to say women are just sexual objects that are ready to go all the time. Never mind that you have kids screaming in the other room, you've had a stressed out day. And so women really strongly feel that.
Well, that's so disheartening, because then what it does, it breaks down the relationship much further than that. I mean, you look at it. I mean, it's across the spectrum then. Like everything falls apart if that's really how it's seen, and that could be from both sides. I don't know that we have to focus on just one side or the other. I think it seems to be more prominent in males. At least it's more. More or hear more about that, but it exists on both sides. But it's just ripping at the fabric of the relationship, and that's
Absolutely.
the thing that we really want to caution everyone about. Now, what the antidote, that's something a little different, right? You just stop it is not necessarily the answer, and that's the hard part.
And one of the things we keep talking about, and again, to just kind of reiterate, and maybe we can close with this. We introduced a model of healing that sexual brokenness, pornography use, infidelity, you name it, premarital sex, is just a smoke alarm telling you that your house is on fire, that you are putting something in the God spot that's not God, to fill your needs. And we're driven to fill those needs. And so when you notice this brokenness, paying attention to what's really driving it underneath becomes important. And so we want to encourage people to not just say, take the battery out of the smoke alarm, pay attention to what is happening and get the healing that you need, because there are powerful drivers that make you say, this is the way I'm going to address my brokenness.
I think one of the things you hear said a lot is triggers. Like, we have to pay attention to triggers. What triggers your desire for this? It's not as much your desire, you run to it. So, just taking the battery out of the smoke alarm isn't doing it. So what really started the fire? I think that's the real important thing that you're trying to say, right?
Yep.
So paying attention to what might have happened in the moment that desire started to surface for porn use. In this particular case, this is what we're talking about. So and then taking that captive, like somehow, how does that then come into play in the healing model? Well, that goes much deeper.
Yeah,
You know,
and
to
we want
expose
to
those wounds.
keep encouraging the deeper. But one of the things I just read that I love is this word futility. And when you see the curse that comes on Adam coming out of the garden, he is cursed that his labor, that's going to be hard labor, right? There's going to be pain in labor. One of the things that you can look at is it's not going to be fruitful. It's going to be hard. And purpose, which is one of the core longings that God had us fulfilled, purpose was completely fulfilled in the garden. Purpose of why you do your labor is going to be taken away. And so that's futility. That's this concept of futility. One of the statistics I just read is when men do not have purpose, or when they believe their purpose is taken away or they're not significant, you will see porn use automatically go up.
Yeah.
So an interesting thing is, rather than kind of go, we got to stop lusts, why don't we pay attention to the lust to say, is this telling us that we're feeling futile? And our drive, instead of for sexual fulfillment at that point, could be for purpose.
Oh, there it is. It's perfect. That's the trigger in some
Yep.
ways that is driving I call it anesthesia. It is the ism. It's in the top of the tree that we're doing to anesthetize ourselves against the hurt.
Yeah.
And maybe the inability to get to purpose. Right? Well, where does really purpose come from? I think this is the thing, especially for Christians. We're talking about people we hope and we believe, and we talk about sexual brokenness in the church. These are, many of the people we're addressing right now are Christ followers. So, so if that is the case, are you really connected to His heart?
Yeah.
For the purposes that He's called you to, and that's a key. Pay attention to, and to go deeper is to really start to sit in His presence and ask Him more for the peace and the direction to start to uncover what that purpose really looks like.
Yeah.
So it's an identity question, right?
Yep.
In the end.
It is an identity question. A lot of this is about identity.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say just kind of for us to wrap up, one thing that was really important in my Christian journey to start to move to other-centered love from my very self-centered love, and I still struggle with that all the time. But to make that move was, I remember God teaching me that this life is just a short-term missions trip. And so I'm made for eternity. Now, I had to contextualize that in terms of years. And so I said, okay, so this is like 2 weeks of my life. And honestly, eternity is much longer than that. But so this is 2 weeks of my life. And so while I'm here, what does it look like? What did God uniquely put me here to do in this time frame? And am I okay in this time that I'm here? If you go on a short-term missions trip to a third world country, you're going to eat food like that you don't want to eat. I'm a foodie. That's like a problem. So I'm going, if I have to eat grasshoppers and rice, for dinner, like that would be a hard thing. If I have to get attacked by bugs and sleep in, mosquito setting, that wouldn't be really comfortable. But here's the deal. On a short-term missions trip, you don't have expectations of it all being about you and all the things you're going to get. And so I think in this area of purpose, again, being driven to say, what did God uniquely make me for this short-term mission trip? What did He send me to do? Like, we need to actually start to go deeper and answer those questions, because I love that attachment that when men don't have purpose, that we see pornography and sexual brokenness rise. And so maybe that's something that can help somebody today tangibly, is to go pay attention to purpose.
Yeah,
in this.
And so I'm sure we'll get more into it. I think we're going to continue on talking with you about this particular. It seems to be the hub or this in the wheel of this whole discussion. So we thank you for joining us, and we'll be back again next round and dig deeper into this. But in the meantime, if you would like to just ask questions, send us an email. info@embracingbrokenness.org, or even in the comments section of the ways that you're watching or listening to this. and we'll try to address them as they come. So God bless you all, and we will see you back real soon.